What if the future King of England looked into the faces of his nephew and niece, Archie and Lilibet, and decided they were no longer worthy of being royal? Can you imagine the devastation? The disbelief? The sheer heartbreak of a mother who thought she had secured her children's place in history, only to watch it vanish in a single decision? That's exactly the storm Meghan Markle now finds herself in, as whispers from inside the palace suggest that Prince William has taken an unexpected, ruthless step. At first, it sounds almost unthinkable. William, the brother who once walked behind Diana's coffin with Harry, shoulder to shoulder in grief, is now the man said to be preparing to strip Harry's children of their royal future. How could something so drastic, so cold, come from someone who knows the pain of loss more than anyone else? And yet, this is where the story begins. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Think about the stakes here. Meghan Markle isn't just a duchess who turned her back on royal life. She's a mother. Every instinct she has screams that Archie and Lilibet deserve protection, love, and yes, a connection to their royal bloodline. To Meghan, stripping those titles isn't just about formality. It's about erasing her children from history, as though they never mattered in the eyes of the monarchy. And if you've followed Meghan's journey, you know one thing. She will not take that lightly. But let's slow down for a moment. Why now? Why, at this moment in history, would William, the steady, reliable heir to the throne, suddenly take such a controversial stance? The monarchy has weathered storms before: divorces, scandals, abdications. Yet few moves have had the power to truly shake its foundations like this one. The timing feels deliberate, almost strategic. And if you listen closely to the insiders, you'll hear whispers of deeper motives, hidden alliances, and a quiet determination from William to set his reign on a course his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, once hinted at in private. Before we get there, let's address the elephant in the room: Meghan's reaction. Imagine the scene. News filters through from London, across oceans, reaching Meghan in Montecito. She's sitting in the kitchen of her multi-million-dollar California mansion, children playing nearby, when a call comes in. The words are sharp, almost cruel in their finality. William has no intention of recognizing Archie and Lilibet as royal heirs. Meghan freezes. Her heart races. Tears sting her eyes, not from shock alone, but from the unmistakable humiliation. For years, she has fought, against the tabloids, against the institution, even against her own in-laws, to prove her place. And now, it's her children who bear the brunt of that battle. Is this revenge? Is this justice? Or is this William's cold calculation of what the monarchy needs to survive in the 21st century? These questions hang heavy in the air, because one thing is certain: Meghan's devastation is real. She never imagined that William, the brother-in-law who once welcomed her into the family, would become the architect of her greatest heartbreak. Now, here's where the story twists. Because William's decision isn't just about Archie and Lilibet. No, it's about power, legacy, and a monarchy desperate to protect its image. Insiders say William views the Sussex children as symbols of a threat: too much American influence, too much Hollywood gloss, too much drama. To William, stripping them of recognition is more than a punishment. It's a reset button, a way to draw a line between the royals who serve the crown and those who turn their backs on it. And yet, does this decision really serve the monarchy, or does it expose its darkest contradictions? Think about it. The monarchy survives on continuity, on bloodlines, on the very idea that no matter the scandal, the crown passes down through generations. So why would William jeopardize that by erasing two children who, through no fault of their own, were born into that bloodline? Could it be that William's true target isn't Archie or Lilibet at all, but Meghan herself? This is where the story begins to unfold like a Shakespearean tragedy. A mother, cornered. A brother, hardened by duty. A monarchy, clinging to survival. And in the middle of it all, two innocent children caught in the crossfire. But let's pause here and ask, when have you ever seen William act with such sharpness? He has always been the steady hand, the dutiful son, the one compared endlessly to his grandmother for his composure. Yet beneath that composure lies a man who has lived through betrayal, scandal, and grief. Some say this decision reflects not cruelty, but a deep desire to protect the crown from further chaos. Others whisper it's revenge cloaked as duty. And Meghan? She sees it as nothing less than an attack on her family. Picture Meghan pacing, her voice breaking as she confides in a close friend. "They've taken everything from me," she might say. "And now, they want to take my children's future too." Imagine the fury bubbling beneath the tears. Meghan knows how to fight back. Through interviews, through carefully crafted narratives, through alliances with Hollywood power players. But will her voice be enough against the future king? And here's the kicker. The story doesn't end with Meghan's tears. Because what William has set in motion could spiral into something much larger. A feud that threatens not only the bond between two brothers, but the very fabric of the monarchy itself. Will Harry stand by his wife, even if it means further alienation from his family? Will Charles intervene, or will he remain silent, letting his heir carry the weight of this decision? And what about Kate? Where does she stand in this battle? These are the questions no one dares to ask out loud, but they are the ones that will define what comes next. Already, insiders claim the walls of Kensington Palace echo with tense conversations, slammed doors, and icy silences. William, resolute. Meghan, inconsolable. Harry, torn in two. The children, blissfully unaware of the storm building around their names. And the public, millions across the world, watching with fascination, horror, and a gnawing curiosity. Because here's the truth, this isn't just royal gossip. It's a battle over legacy, identity, and the question of who gets to belong. And once a line like this is drawn, it can never be erased. So buckle up, because the story you're about to hear will take you inside the palace walls, behind the carefully curated smiles, into the whispered conversations and hidden motives. This is more than a family feud. This is history being rewritten in real time. And what comes next? Well, what comes next will change everything. And no one, not Meghan, not Harry, not even William himself, could have predicted just how explosive the fallout would be. It happened without warning. No press leaks, no whispered hints in glossy tabloids, no gentle build-up to prepare Meghan or Harry for the impact. One day, the royal family looked steady, the hierarchy predictable. The next, a decision landed like a thunderclap across the Atlantic. William, the future king, had made up his mind. Archie and Lilibet would not enjoy the royal recognition their parents once assumed was theirs by birthright. Shocking? Absolutely. Unprecedented? In some ways, yes. Because William, for all his reputation as the calm and steady heir, is not usually associated with sudden, disruptive moves. He is the careful one, the patient one, the brother who, unlike Harry, rarely rocks the boat. But when it came to Archie and Lilibet, insiders whisper he acted with a firmness that left even his closest advisors stunned. Why would he do it? That's the question echoing not only in Montecito, but also in quiet corners of Britain's pubs, across royal watchers' forums, and even within the palace itself. Why would William, the man so deeply aware of his mother's legacy, choose to cut his brother's children from the institution his family has guarded for centuries? Was this truly about protecting the monarchy, or was it personal? Let's rewind for a moment. William's entire life has been defined by duty. He was just a boy when he walked behind his mother's coffin, but even then, the cameras captured something telling: his resolve. While Harry's face was etched in open pain, William's eyes revealed something else: a quiet, unyielding strength. That strength has carried him through decades of public scrutiny, scandal, and betrayal. It has shaped him into the man the world sees today. A leader who places the crown above his own comfort. And when he looked at Archie and Lilibet, William saw a decision that would shape not only their lives, but his reign. The announcement, or rather, the discreet but undeniable message, was delivered not in the form of a press release, but through carefully chosen actions. Invitations were withheld, protocols adjusted. The subtle yet unmistakable signal was clear: Archie and Lilibet would not be accorded the recognition of full royal heirs. And as word trickled out, the shockwaves spread faster than wildfire. Now, let's not pretend Meghan was the only one blindsided. Harry, too, by all accounts, felt a surge of disbelief. His relationship with William has been fractured for years, but even in the deepest rifts, there was a lingering hope that his children would be spared the consequences of family feuds. That hope crumbled in an instant. Picture the moment Harry received the news. Perhaps it was through a late-night call with a palace aide, perhaps through a curt email that left no room for debate. The details don't matter as much as the reaction. A man staring at his phone in silence, jaw clenched, realizing that his own brother had just drawn the harshest possible line in the sand. And here's the twist. William wasn't just acting alone. Behind his decision, sources suggest, lies a chorus of advisors, courtiers, and strategists who believe the monarchy's survival hinges on drawing boundaries. To them, Archie and Lilibet represent uncertainty, even risk. Raised in California, growing up under Meghan's influence, they are children of the modern world, not the crown. To keep them within the royal fold, they argue, would be to invite chaos. William listened, and then acted. But was it really strategy, or something darker? There's a school of thought, whispered in drawing rooms and speculated in headlines, that William's decision is rooted in resentment. Resentment toward Harry for leaving. Resentment toward Meghan for disrupting the family. And resentment toward the global fascination that followed them across the Atlantic, overshadowing William and Kate at times. If that's true, then Archie and Lilibet aren't just innocent bystanders. They are pawns in a revenge game. Now pause for a second and ask yourself, what kind of man chooses to punish children for the actions of their parents? Is this truly William's voice? Or is it the echo of a centuries-old monarchy that has always put the institution above individuals, no matter the cost? The contradictions here are staggering. William, the father who dotes on George, Charlotte, and Louis, now accused of coldly dismissing his own niece and nephew's rightful place. A man shaped by the trauma of losing his mother, now inflicting trauma, however indirect, on his brother's family. It's Shakespeare come to life. Duty and betrayal, love and rivalry, all colliding under the weight of the crown. But let's not overlook the public optics. In Britain, many royal supporters quietly approve of William's stance. They see Archie and Lilibet as outsiders, American children, detached from the traditions that define the monarchy. To them, William's decision feels like a necessary safeguard, a line drawn to protect the crown's dignity. In America, however, the reaction is the opposite. Outrage, sympathy for Meghan, and condemnation of what many perceive as cruelty. William, once seen as the world's most relatable prince, suddenly cast as the villain. And in Montecito, Meghan's tears tell their own story. Now, let's move from the global stage back into the personal. Sources close to the Sussexes describe Meghan as devastated, blindsided, and furious all at once. Her instinct as a mother is to fight. To her, William's decision isn't about royal titles. It's about erasing her children's identity. Imagine explaining to Archie one day why his cousins wear crowns and wave from palace balconies while he is left watching from afar. Imagine telling Lilibet that her name, chosen to honor the late queen, carries no official recognition in the very family it was meant to honor. That's the wound Meghan feels most deeply. But here's where the story takes another twist. Because William's decision, far from silencing Meghan, may have ignited a fire within her. Meghan knows how to command the world's attention. She knows how to frame narratives, how to tap into the power of media, how to shift public sympathy. And as devastated as she may be, insiders suggest she's already plotting her response. And Harry? That's where it gets complicated. He's torn between two worlds, his loyalty to Meghan and his children, and his unshakable bond with the institution he was born into. Harry has already walked away once. But now, faced with William's decision, he's forced to confront a brutal reality. His children's place in the monarchy is gone, unless he can somehow repair the bridge with his brother. Which leads us to the ultimate question. Is reconciliation even possible after this? Or has William's decision burned the last remaining bridge between them? This chapter doesn't end with Meghan's tears, nor with William's resolve. No, it ends with something darker. Because even as Meghan tries to process the news, a whisper reaches her ears. A whisper of a name tied to William's inner circle, someone she trusted once, someone who played a role in pushing this decision forward. That revelation, insiders say, shattered Meghan in ways no royal decree ever could. And as the pieces fall into place, Meghan's devastation begins to morph into determination. Because what comes next won't be quiet. It won't be meek. It will be war. But before we dive into Meghan's emotional fallout, the late-night tears, the phone calls to allies, the fury that sparked behind the scenes, there's one more revelation you need to hear. One that will make you question whether William truly acted alone or whether this was part of a plan years in the making. And once you hear who Meghan blames, you'll understand why her heartbreak turned into a storm that no one, not even William himself, saw coming. She couldn't believe it. Meghan Markle sat frozen in her Montecito home, the words still ringing in her ears. William's decision was final. Archie and Lilibet would be stripped of royal recognition. At first, there was silence. Then came the tears, hot, unrelenting, unstoppable. For Meghan, this wasn't just a rejection. It was humiliation. It was betrayal. It was the final confirmation that, no matter how hard she fought, she would never truly be accepted by the institution she had once tried to embrace. Picture the scene. Sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor, Archie's laughter echoing faintly in the background, Lilibet toddling with innocence. And Meghan, standing there, clutching her phone like it had delivered a death sentence. Her heart raced. Her throat tightened. She whispered aloud, maybe even to herself, "They can't do this to my children." But they had. And worse, it wasn't faceless courtiers or distant advisors. It was William, Harry's brother, her children's uncle. The irony was crushing. Meghan had endured years of being painted as the outsider, the disruptor, the American actress who couldn't follow the rules. She had fought back, telling her side of the story in interviews, documentaries, podcasts. But through it all, there had been one thin thread of hope, that Archie and Lilibet, as royal blood, would still hold their rightful place in the history books. That thread had been cut clean through. How do you process something like that? Meghan did what any mother would do. She cried. But these weren't ordinary tears. They were tears laced with fury, with fear, with the ache of a woman who felt her children had been punished for choices they never made. She cried for Archie, who would one day ask why his cousins could call themselves princes and princesses while he could not. She cried for Lilibet, whose very name honored the late queen, and yet would now be dismissed by the family it was meant to honor. And then, after the tears, came the questions. Why now? Why William? Why so public, even in its quiet delivery? Meghan's mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. Was this revenge? Was this the monarchy's way of striking back at her and Harry for daring to walk away? Or was it, as some insiders whispered, a cold calculation to protect the crown's image from the Hollywood problem she represented? It's easy to imagine Meghan pacing the room, tears still on her cheeks, phone in hand, dialing trusted friends in Hollywood. She would vent, unload, seek validation. "They're erasing my children," she might have said. "They're trying to write them out of history." The friends would console her, reassure her that the world was on her side. But even as they spoke, Meghan knew the truth. William's word carried more weight than hers in the one arena that mattered most, the monarchy itself. The fallout wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. Meghan knew better than anyone that in the war of image and perception, silence could be deadly. Already, she was thinking ahead. How would she tell this story? How would she frame it so the world understood her pain, her outrage, her refusal to back down? Because Meghan wasn't just crying. She was calculating. Every tear, every sigh, every sleepless night would feed into a narrative she could shape and control. But let's pause for a moment and ask the uncomfortable question. Were the tears entirely about Archie and Lilibet? Or was there, buried beneath the heartbreak, another wound? The wound of rejection. Not just of her children, but of herself. Meghan had entered the royal family believing she could modernize it, shake it, even save it. Instead, she had been cast out, vilified, and now, stripped of the one thing that might have bound her children to that legacy. The tears were for them, yes, but they were also for the dream she had once clung to. Harry, of course, was caught in the middle. Reports suggest he tried to comfort Meghan, holding her, telling her they'd be okay. But how could he truly reassure her, when he himself felt gutted by his brother's decision? Harry knew what titles meant. He knew the symbolic power of recognition, the way it defined childhoods and shaped futures. To see his children denied that was to relive, in some twisted way, his own feelings of being the spare. Meghan cried openly. Harry, as always, carried his pain more quietly. The world, though, wouldn't see those tears, at least not immediately. Meghan was careful. She had learned the hard way how quickly vulnerability could be weaponized against her. So while she confided in friends and allies, publicly she held her head high. But make no mistake, behind the calm exterior, she was unraveling. Every news article speculating about William's decision, every commentator debating Archie and Lilibet's future, cut deeper than the last. And then came the whispers. Names. Meghan began to hear that William hadn't acted alone, that someone close to him, someone she had once trusted, had played a role in convincing him to take this path. The realization hit like a dagger. Betrayal layered on top of heartbreak. She cried again, not just for her children, but for the sting of knowing someone she had let into her confidence had turned against her. So what did Meghan do? She turned the pain into fuel. Late at night, when the house was quiet, she scribbled notes, drafted ideas, called confidences. She began sketching the outline of her counter-strategy. Maybe it would be a major interview, maybe a documentary, maybe a series of speeches highlighting the cruelty of the monarchy. Whatever the format, Meghan knew one thing. Her voice would not be silenced. If William thought he could strip her children of recognition and end the story there, he was wrong. Very wrong. But here's the irony. The more Meghan plotted her response, the more the palace tightened its grip. Insiders say William, far from backing down, doubled down on his decision, instructing advisors to hold the line. No concessions, no negotiations. To William, this wasn't a fight with Meghan. It was a defining moment for the crown. And if Meghan wanted war, he was ready. The emotional fallout of that realization was crushing. Meghan cried again. Yes, but this time the tears were different. No longer tears of shock or even humiliation. They were tears of anger, of defiance, the kind of tears that hardened into resolve. She looked at Archie and Lilibet and whispered to herself, I will not let them erase you. And that's where chapter 2 closes, not with Meghan broken, but with Meghan rising. The emotional fallout gave way to something else, determination. And as she prepared to fight, she stumbled upon something that would fuel her fire even more. Hidden palace letters, passed down quietly, holding words that cast doubt on the very foundation of Archie and Lilibet's place in the family. And those letters, those hidden, damning pieces of history, would ignite a scandal far bigger than William's decision. Because what Meghan discovered next wasn't just about titles. It was about secrets buried deep within the palace walls. And those secrets? They would change everything. Tucked away in an old desk drawer, buried beneath years of paperwork, ceremony schedules, and family correspondence, lay the letters. Fragile sheets of paper, ink fading but words still powerful enough to stir fury in Meghan Markle's heart. Letters that no one outside the palace walls was ever meant to see. Letters that carried whispers of doubt about her children's rightful place in the monarchy. Imagine Meghan, already shattered by William's decision, being handed copies of these documents. Perhaps they came through a friend who had connections deep in the palace. Perhaps they were leaked by someone disillusioned with the firm. However they arrived, their timing was devastating and explosive. As Meghan unfolded the pages, her eyes widened, her breath caught, and her anger transformed into something darker, conviction. The content was damning. Hints, subtle yet unmistakable, that certain senior royals had long questioned whether Archie and Lilibet should ever be recognized as true heirs. Not because of bloodlines, they were Harry's children after all, but because of the circumstances surrounding Meghan and her uneasy fit within the family. One line, chilling in its bluntness, allegedly read, recognition must reflect not only birth but duty, and doubts remain about those raised beyond the crown's reach. To Meghan, those words were not abstract. They were a direct attack on her children, on her motherhood, on her very identity. She could almost hear the voices of the courtiers who had whispered these doubts in smoky backrooms, framing her children not as innocent heirs, but as liabilities. But here's where it gets even more shocking. These letters weren't recent. They dated back to the Queen's reign. That's right. Queen Elizabeth herself had been aware of discussions about Archie and Lilibet's status. Whether she endorsed them or simply allowed them to exist in silence is unclear. But the fact that such doubts lingered in writing made Meghan's heartbreak all the more unbearable. Think about it. The late Queen, who Meghan and Harry had always portrayed as warm and kind to them personally, may have silently permitted an undercurrent of skepticism about their children. Can you imagine the betrayal Meghan felt upon realizing that the one figure she thought had shown her grace might have stood by as others questioned Archie and Lilibet's place in the family? The contradiction was suffocating. Meghan had named her daughter Lilibet specifically as a tribute to the Queen, a gesture of respect, even reconciliation. And yet, here in black and white, were words suggesting that the very legacy she tried to honor had been quietly working against her children. The letters also revealed names of individuals within the palace who had pushed hardest for this stance. And when Meghan saw one particular name, her world stopped. It wasn't William. It wasn't Charles. It was someone closer, someone she had once thought of as an ally within the family machine. That revelation cut deeper than any headline, any rumor. This wasn't just William's decision anymore. It was part of a history of doubt, stretching back years, perhaps even before Archie was born. Now pause for a moment. How would you react if you discovered that your children had been quietly written out of history before they even had a chance to live it? Would you rage? Would you collapse? Or would you, like Meghan, begin plotting your counterattack? Because make no mistake, Meghan wasn't just devastated. She was energized. Every word on those letters became fuel. Every whispered doubt became evidence. Evidence she could use to expose the cruelty, the hypocrisy, the double standards of the monarchy. But before we go there, let's dig deeper into what the letters truly mean. At their core, they reveal the monarchy's greatest fear, dilution. To the firm, bloodlines are everything, but so is proximity. Children raised outside the UK, outside the palace's tight grip, are wild cards. They can't be molded, scripted, or controlled in the same way as those who grow up under the Queen's watchful eye. Archie and Lilibet, growing up in California, surrounded by American culture, Hollywood influence, and Meghan's fiercely independent parenting, were seen as too unpredictable, too risky, too foreign. And so, even before William's announcement, the groundwork had been laid. Quietly, strategically, through letters that carried no official decree but set the tone for the institution's unspoken stance. William's decision, then, wasn't a sudden thunderclap. It was the final act in a play years in the making. This realization hit Meghan like a second betrayal layered on the first. It wasn't just William. It wasn't just the monarchy of today. It was the monarchy of yesterday, too. The very family legacy she thought she could influence, maybe even modernize, had been plotting against her children from the start. And here's where the story becomes even more riveting. Because Meghan, as emotional as she was, also understood something crucial. These letters could become her weapon. If they ever saw the light of day, they would shatter the monarchy's carefully crafted image. Imagine the headlines. Palace letters reveal doubts about Archie and Lilibet's royal future. The outrage would be global. The damage, irreversible. But revealing them came with risk. To leak such documents would be to declare all-out war. Not just against William, not just against Charles, but against the entire institution. Meghan knew that once she crossed that line, there would be no going back. Yet the temptation was overwhelming. For a woman who had built her life on storytelling, on shaping narratives, on exposing truths, these letters were a story too powerful to keep hidden. And so she wept again, but this time the tears weren't helpless. They were purposeful. They were the kind of tears that come when you realize you've been pushed too far, and the only option left is to fight back with everything you have. Harry's reaction to the letters is said to have been quieter, more restrained, but no less pained. He had always suspected the institution would resist fully embracing his children. Now, seeing it in writing, he was crushed. For Harry, it was another wound from the family he had already sacrificed so much to escape. And yet, even in his heartbreak, he hesitated. Unlike Meghan, Harry still carried a thread of loyalty to the crown. Could he really allow those letters to be used as a weapon? That difference between them, Meghan's fiery resolve and Harry's reluctant restraint, would become another fault line in their marriage. A fault line William may have counted on. But let's not forget the audience in all of this, the public. Because while Meghan wrestled with whether to expose the letters, word of their existence began to leak. Rumors circulated. Journalists whispered about documents in the palace archives that raised serious questions about the Sussex children's recognition. The public didn't have the text, but they had the intrigue. And intrigue, as the monarchy knows all too well, can be just as dangerous as fact. The palace, of course, remained silent. But silence can be louder than words. And in that silence, Meghan heard confirmation. Confirmation that the monarchy knew what those letters said. Confirmation that William's decision wasn't a one-off. It was institutional. It was deliberate. Which brings us to the cliffhanger. Because the story of these letters doesn't end with Meghan's tears or even her plotting. No, the real twist comes when Meghan begins to ask herself a chilling question. If these doubts had been recorded so long ago, what else had been written? What other secrets lay buried in palace archives, waiting to be uncovered? And that, dear listener, is where Chapter 3 ends. With Meghan staring at those fragile sheets of paper, fury in her veins, betrayal in her heart, and a single thought burning in her mind. If this is what they said about my children in private, what else have they been hiding? What comes next? A late-night phone call, a confrontation between brothers, and a decision Harry makes that will shake this feud to its core. Every man has a breaking point. For Prince Harry, that point came the night he realized his entire world was pulling him in two opposite directions. His brother, bound by duty and tradition, on one side, and his wife, broken and furious, on the other. At the center of the storm sat two small children, Archie and Lilibet, blissfully unaware of the tidal wave crashing over their futures. Picture the scene. Harry alone in his Montecito study, dim light from a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. His phone buzzes endlessly, messages from aides, missed calls from old friends in London, and one from his brother, William. Meghan's voice lingers in the air from an earlier conversation, raw with tears. And Harry, staring into the dark, feels the same ache he's carried his entire life, the ache of being forced to choose. This wasn't the first time Harry found himself torn between family and love. Remember Diana. Remember the fractured home, the paparazzi flashbulbs, the endless criticism. Harry grew up watching his mother struggle against the very machine that now threatens Meghan and their children. He once swore he'd never let history repeat itself. And yet, here it was, repeating with chilling precision. On one side, William's cold decree. Archie and Lilibet will not be recognized as royals. On the other, Meghan's devastation. They've erased our children. Harry knew both were true, but his heart couldn't reconcile them. He loved his brother. He adored his wife. But they had become enemies in a war that demanded he pick a side. The phone rang again. William. Harry hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Did he really want to hear his brother's voice, steady and resolute, delivering words that cut like knives? Finally, he answered. Harry. William's voice was firm, clipped, almost rehearsed. You know why this has to be done. Harry's jaw clenched. He could almost see his brother's expression, the calm mask he always wore when duty outweighed emotion. No, William. I don't know. These are children. My children. There was silence, heavy and suffocating. Then William spoke again. It's not personal. It's about the crown. You left. You made your choice. The monarchy has to survive. Harry's fist tightened around the phone. He wanted to shout, to scream that it was always about the crown, always about survival, never about family. But he stopped himself, because somewhere, deep down, he understood what William meant. And that understanding only made the pain worse. When the call ended, Harry sat in silence, the words echoing in his mind. You left. You made your choice. That night, Meghan found him there, slumped in his chair, staring into nothing. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes red from crying. You can't let him do this, she whispered. You have to fight for them. And there it was, the ultimatum. Meghan needed Harry not just as a husband, but as a warrior. She needed him to confront William, to tear down the wall the monarchy had built around her children. But Harry, torn as ever, hesitated. Because to fight William meant severing what little bond remained between them. This internal conflict tore at Harry's very identity. He wasn't just a man in love. He was a prince raised in the shadow of the crown. His blood carried centuries of tradition. His soul carried his mother's pain. His heart carried Meghan's pleas. And now, all three collided in a storm no one could navigate without losing something vital. Let's pause here and ask, what would you do? If you were Harry, Would you side with your brother, the man who shared your childhood, your grief, your mother's legacy? Or would you side with your wife, the woman you vowed to protect, the mother of your children? Harry chose neither. At least, not right away. Instead, he sought answers. Late at night, he made a call of his own. Not to William, not to Meghan's Hollywood allies, but to a confidant who had served the royal family for decades. Someone who had seen the inner workings of the palace and lived to tell about it. Harry wanted the truth. Were Archie and Lilibet really considered threats? Were there really letters, whispers, and plans to erase them from the monarchy's future? The voice on the other end was weary, aged, but honest. Harry, the crown has always been ruthless when it comes to survival. It isn't about you. It isn't about Meghan. It's about the institution. And once they decide, there's no going back. The words hit Harry harder than William's did, because they confirmed what he feared most, that his children were casualties in a war older than all of them. But Meghan wouldn't accept that answer. To her, giving up meant surrendering her children's legacy. So she pushed Harry harder. Fight them, she pleaded. Don't let them win. Not again. Harry's nights became sleepless, his days restless. He'd hold Archie in his arms, watch Lilibet giggle, and feel the crushing weight of knowing their futures had been decided without their say. He'd replay William's words in his mind, then hear Meghan's cries, and feel his chest tighten as if it might break. And yet, despite the turmoil, Harry hesitated to act, because deep in his heart, he still loved his brother, still remembered the boy who shared his grief, who stood beside him when the world collapsed. Harry wanted to believe there was still a chance to save that bond. But with every tear Meghan shed, that chance seemed to slip further away. The irony here is painful. For years, Harry had accused William of being cold, unfeeling, trapped in the cage of duty. And now, Harry found himself torn between the very two things William had always chosen, the crown or the family. Except for Harry, the stakes weren't abstract. They were his children, his blood, his legacy. By the end of that week, Harry reached his breaking point. He picked up his phone again, dialed William's number, and prepared for a confrontation that would echo for years. The call didn't last long, but it ended with words that left even William stunned. Harry's voice shook with fury as he said, "If you strip my children of their legacy, then you strip yourself of a brother." The line went silent. Both men knew what had just happened. The bridge between them, already cracked and fragile, had just been set ablaze. When Harry hung up, Meghan was there, her eyes searching his. "What did you say?" she asked. Harry's chest heaved. "I told him the truth. It's him or us." Meghan's tears returned, but this time, they weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. For the first time, she felt Harry had chosen her, chosen their children, over the monarchy that had haunted them for years. But in choosing her, Harry had also chosen war. And that war was about to take a darker, more treacherous turn. Because while Harry wrestled with his loyalty, William wasn't alone. Courtiers, advisors, and long-serving staff were already moving pieces on the chessboard. And when one of those staffers leaked something Meghan never expected, her fragile trust in everything collapsed once more. The fallout would be catastrophic. And that is where Chapter 4 ends, with Harry caught, torn, and finally forced to declare a side, only to discover that the real betrayal wasn't coming from William alone. What comes next? A palace whisper, a staffer's betrayal, and a revelation that will leave Meghan more shattered than ever before. The walls of Buckingham Palace have ears. Always have. Always will. Behind the gilded portraits and centuries-old curtains, the true power of the monarchy isn't only in the crown, it's in the courtiers. The men and women who whisper in shadows, who pull strings behind closed doors, who plant ideas like seeds until they blossom into decisions that shape history. And in the case of Archie and Lilibet, it wasn't William alone who made the call. The courtiers had been whispering for years. Picture the scene, a smoky, oak-paneled room, decades of history echoing from the bookshelves. Senior aides sit around a table, their voices low but sharp. The Sussex children, one says, must be handled carefully. Too much American influence. Too much unpredictability. Another nods, adding, titles are not birthrights, they are responsibilities. And we cannot risk responsibilities falling into hands outside the crown's control. Those whispers, quiet at first, grew louder over the years. By the time William took action, the courtiers had already laid the groundwork. To them, Meghan was a disruptor. Harry was a liability. And Archie and Lilibet? Potential wildcards who could fracture the monarchy's image if left unchecked. But here's the cruel irony. The monarchy has always depended on whispers. Decisions are rarely announced in fiery declarations. They are murmured into existence, passed along corridors, shaped by nods and raised eyebrows, until suddenly they appear as inevitabilities. And that's exactly what happened here. William may have been the face of the decision, but the courtiers were its architects. Now imagine Meghan learning this. It wasn't just William's betrayal. It was the betrayal of an entire machine she could never outmaneuver. Meghan had always believed she could outsmart the system, through interviews, through her media strategy, through sheer charisma. But the courtiers weren't playing in the spotlight. They thrived in the shadows. And they had been whispering about her children since the day Archie was born. One aide reportedly said in private, "The Sussexes chose exile. They chose independence. They cannot have both independence and entitlement. The line must be drawn." Cold words, calculated words, that stripped away any illusion Meghan had left. And here's where it gets even more devastating. Among those whispering courtiers was a familiar name, someone Meghan had once spoken to, confided in, even trusted to some degree. That name, now linked to the erosion of her children's recognition, hit her like a thunderbolt. It wasn't just William. It wasn't just Charles. It was someone in the system she thought might be sympathetic. Another betrayal, layered on top of so many others. Meghan's fury deepened. Her tears dried. She began to see the monarchy for what it truly was. Not a family, not an institution of tradition, but a fortress built on whispers. Whispers that could erase, diminish, and destroy with quiet precision. Harry, of course, knew this already. He had grown up among the whispers. He had seen courtiers leak stories to the press, spin narratives, protect reputations at the cost of others. But even he hadn't expected the whispers to turn so cruelly against his children. Let's pause here and ask, how much power do these courtiers really have? More than you'd think. The Queen listened to them. Charles listens to them. And now William does too. They are the keepers of continuity, the invisible hands guiding the crown. And when they decide someone is a threat, history shows they rarely lose. The whispers didn't stay confined to palace walls. They leaked, as whispers often do. First to journalists known for their loyalty, then into editorials, shaping public opinion without revealing their source. Headlines emerged questioning whether Archie and Lilibet should be burdened with titles they might never use. Opinion pieces asked if royal recognition made sense for children living in California, far from the crown they were meant to serve. Do you see the pattern? The palace never had to declare anything. The whispers did the work for them. By the time William acted, the public had already been primed. For many, it didn't feel like a shocking betrayal. It felt like the natural next step. That was the courtier's genius. Meghan, however, wasn't fooled. She saw through the spin. To her, it was clear. The monarchy had waged a silent war on her children, a campaign fought not with swords but with whispers. And she wasn't about to let those whispers define her family's legacy. The emotional toll was brutal. Meghan felt isolated, targeted, humiliated all over again. Harry felt powerless, knowing that the same machine that once destroyed his mother's peace of mind was now turning on his wife and children. History wasn't just repeating, it was accelerating. And yet, within that devastation, a new fire was lit. Meghan began to plot her counterstrike. If the courtier's whispers could shape the narrative, then so could hers. She had Hollywood on her side. She had global media platforms. She had the ability to turn her pain into a story that resonated with millions. But here's the problem. The courtiers weren't done. They had one more card to play, and it came in the form of a leak so devastating, so personal, that it pushed Meghan closer to the edge than ever before. A longtime staffer, someone who had once worked closely with Meghan during her brief time in the UK, quietly fed a story to the press. The details were murky, the timing suspicious, but the damage was clear. The leak wasn't just about Meghan. It wasn't just about Harry. It was about Archie and Lilibet directly. A suggestion, subtle but poisonous, that their place in the royal family had been questioned from the very beginning. When Meghan read the article, her hands shook. This wasn't rumor anymore. This wasn't speculation. This was betrayal by someone she had once passed in palace hallways, smiled at, maybe even thanked. Someone she thought of as neutral had joined the chorus of whispers working against her children. Her fury was volcanic. She wept again, yes, but with the rage of a mother cornered. And then she looked at Harry and said, "Enough is enough." That moment marked a turning point. Meghan's emotional fallout was no longer private grief, it was becoming public war. Every whisper against her children would be met with her voice, amplified to the world. Every betrayal would be answered with exposure. But Harry, ever the reluctant warrior, hesitated again. Could they really go head-to-head with the monarchy and win? Could they really take on not just William, but an entire system of courtiers whose whispers had shaped generations? Those questions hung heavy in their home, heavy in their marriage, heavy in their future. And yet, Meghan's resolve only hardened. Because the whispers had done more than strip her children's titles. They had awakened her fiercest weapon, the determination to fight back with everything she had. And so, as palace whispers continued to swirl, Meghan began to prepare her counterattack. A strategy that would not only defend Archie and Lilibet, but expose the monarchy's darkest fears. But before that counterstrike could begin, another storm was brewing, one centered on the children themselves. Because while Meghan and Harry fought their battles, the real question remained. What did this mean for Archie and Lilibet's future? And that question, about legacy, about childhood, about identity, would become the next battleground in this war. Imagine being born into a world where your very name carries centuries of history, where your great-grandmother was the longest reigning monarch in British history, your grandfather is the current king, your uncle the heir apparent. And yet, imagine growing up thousands of miles away, told that you are no longer part of the story. That's the cruel paradox facing Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana. On paper, their legacy should be undeniable. They are the children of a prince, direct descendants of the House of Windsor. In the past, that would have been enough. No questions asked. But the monarchy of the 21st century doesn't play by the same rules. It bends, twists, and recalibrates depending on who fits the narrative. And according to William and his advisors, Archie and Lilibet no longer fit. Let's pause for a moment and think about the human cost of that decision. Archie is just a boy, growing up in the sunny sprawl of California, blissfully unaware of the power struggle shaping his life. He plays in the backyard, laughs with his sister, and clings to the warmth of his mother's embrace. But one day, he will ask questions. One day, he will notice that his cousins, George, Charlotte, Louis, carry titles, wave from palace balconies, and are celebrated as the future of the monarchy. And when that day comes, he will look at Meghan and Harry and ask, "Why not me?" What answer could they possibly give him? Lilibet, even younger, carries an even heavier burden in her name. She is literally named after Queen Elizabeth's private family nickname, a moniker drenched in royal tradition. Meghan and Harry believed it was a gesture of respect, a bridge between their children and the institution they had left behind. And yet, Lilibet's name now feels like a cruel twist of irony. The Queen's beloved nickname turned into a symbol of exclusion, rejection, and erasure. To Meghan, this is nothing short of devastating. She knows what it feels like to be treated as an outsider, to be dismissed as less than. But to see that same dismissal projected onto her children, it's unbearable. She sees their royal legacy slipping through their fingers, not because of anything they've done, but because of who she is. And that knowledge haunts her. But here's where the story grows even darker. Because the stripping of titles isn't just about names. It's about identity. It's about belonging. And it's about security. Titles in the royal family don't only signify status. They offer protection, literally and figuratively. They create a shield of recognition, a guarantee of place. Without them, Archie and Lilibet become more vulnerable, more ordinary, easier to ignore. And Meghan knows this. She knows that every time her children are excluded, every time their names are left off lists of royal heirs, the narrative hardens. The world begins to forget them. The monarchy begins to erase them. Harry, too, feels the sting. He remembers his own childhood, growing up as the spare, forever in William's shadow. The title of prince gave him significance, even when he felt invisible compared to his brother. Without that title, he wonders, how will his children find their place? Will they grow up always asking why they weren't deemed enough? Now, let's turn to the palace's perspective. Insiders argue that denying Archie and Lilibet royal recognition is not cruelty, it's clarity. They say the monarchy must slim down, must focus on the direct line of succession. To them, Archie and Lilibet are too far removed, too American, too detached from the daily grind of royal life. Why burden them with titles they will never use? Why confuse the public with more royals who don't serve the crown? But here's the flaw in that logic. Archie and Lilibet are not distant cousins. They are direct grandchildren of the reigning king. Their erasure is not slimming down, it's rewriting history. And the contradiction doesn't end there. The monarchy has a long history of accommodating family members who live unconventional lives. Titles have been extended to cousins, uncles, even distant relatives whose ties to the crown are far weaker. Yet Archie and Lilibet, with Windsor blood running through their veins, are dismissed. Why? Because their mother is Meghan. Because their parents dared to walk away. Because their existence is a reminder of the monarchy's inability to control the narrative. That's the heart of Meghan's fury. To her, this isn't about tradition. It's about punishment. Her children are being punished for her choices. Punished for Harry's choices. Punished for daring to build a life outside the palace gates. And no mother can endure that without fighting back. The emotional weight of this decision reverberates daily in Montecito. Meghan imagines the future, school projects where Archie's classmates ask about his royal relatives, birthday parties where awkward questions surface, interviews where Lilibet is forced to explain her name. Every scenario becomes a reminder that their legacy has been tarnished, not by fate, but by choice. By William's choice. By the courtiers' whispers. By the institution that should have protected them. And yet, amid the devastation, Meghan begins to see something else, an opportunity. If the monarchy will not give her children recognition, then she will create it elsewhere. Through philanthropy, media, storytelling, and influence, she can shape their legacy outside the palace. She can build them into global figures, free of the constraints of royal tradition. In her mind, if the crown won't have them, the world will. But Harry doesn't see it that way. To him, the loss of titles is not an opportunity, it's a wound. He knows the world will always compare his children to their cousins. He knows Archie will always wonder why George will be king while he is sidelined. He knows Lilibet will grow up with a name that ties her to a family that didn't want her. And for Harry, the pain of watching his children inherit rejection is unbearable. The tension between Meghan's resolve and Harry's grief creates another fracture in their home. Meghan is ready to fight. Harry is still mourning. And in that divide, the monarchy finds power. But here's the real tragedy. Archie and Lilibet have no say. They are too young to understand, too innocent to comprehend the storm around them. And yet, their futures are being shaped by decisions made in palaces thousands of miles away. Decisions rooted in politics, tradition, and vendettas they will never fully grasp. And this leads us to the next chapter of the story, the fight back. Meghan, devastated but determined, begins plotting her counter-strategy. She won't let the monarchy erase her children. She won't let whispers define their legacy. She will take the fight to the public, to the media, to the world. But her boldest move yet will shock even Harry. Because Meghan's counterplan isn't just about protecting her children. It's about rewriting the monarchy's story itself. And when Harry discovers what Meghan is planning, he's forced to confront a terrifying question. Is Meghan saving their family, or dragging them into a battle they can never win? Enough was enough. Meghan Markle had cried her tears, slammed her fists against her desk, and whispered her fury to the walls of Montecito. But grief can only last so long. At some point, it hardens into resolve. At some point, pain transforms into power. For Meghan, that moment arrived the night she sat alone in her California kitchen, staring at a blank notepad, and began sketching out the blueprint for her counterstrike. This wasn't going to be a quiet fight. It wasn't going to be a dignified shrug or a polite statement released through a spokesperson. Meghan had seen how the monarchy operated, with whispers, with shadows, with hidden letters tucked away in drawers. That was their weapon. But she had her own. She had her voice. She had Hollywood. She had the world's spotlight at her fingertips. And if William thought stripping Archie and Lilibet of recognition would silence her, he had underestimated her entirely. The first step of Meghan's counterplan was control of the narrative. For years, she had been the subject of headlines she didn't write, caricatures she didn't recognize, and attacks she didn't anticipate. This time, she would be the one telling the story, not as a victim, but as a mother. Not as a duchess turned exile, but as a woman defending her children against an ancient, unfeeling machine. She knew the power of framing. In Hollywood, it's everything. The way a story is told determines whether the audience cheers or jeers. And Meghan was no stranger to storytelling. So she began outlining interviews, speeches, and maybe even a new documentary. Not about herself this time, but about Archie and Lilibet. About what it meant to grow up with royal blood, but without royal recognition. About what it meant for a mother to watch her children erased by history. The second step was allies. Meghan knew she couldn't fight the monarchy alone, but she also knew she didn't have to. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from Hollywood producers, sympathetic politicians, and influential voices who had watched her journey with both fascination and sympathy. To them, Meghan wasn't just a duchess. She was a symbol. A woman of color who had challenged one of the most powerful institutions on earth and survived. And now, she was ready to lead a new charge. She began calling those allies. Late-night conversations with producers about projects that could set the record straight. Meetings with philanthropists about campaigns focusing on children's rights and identity. Whispered promises from political figures who saw her as more than a headline. They saw her as a cause. Each call strengthened her resolve. Each promise built the scaffolding of her counterplan. The third step was visibility. If the monarchy's plan was to quietly sideline Archie and Lilibet, Meghan's plan was to do the opposite, to make them impossible to ignore. She imagined glossy magazine covers, not of herself, but of her children. Carefully crafted appearances at charity events, where Archie and Lilibet's presence would speak louder than any royal decree. Strategic moments that would cement them in the public's imagination not as forgotten heirs, but as global figures in their own right. But here's where the story takes a darker twist. Because Meghan's counterplan wasn't just about visibility, it was about exposure. She had the letters. She had the whispers. She had enough fragments of palace intrigue to build a damning portrait of the monarchy's hypocrisy. And the temptation was unbearable. Should she reveal them? Should she risk total war by releasing documents that proved her children had been written out long before William's decision? Harry hesitated. Harry feared. Harry knew that once those letters saw daylight, there would be no going back. But Meghan wasn't thinking about reconciliation anymore. She was thinking about survival, about legacy, about making sure her children would never grow up asking why they weren't enough. Her plan, however, went even deeper than interviews and leaks. Meghan knew the monarchy thrived on control, on dictating the rules of who belonged and who didn't. To break that control, she had to redefine the rules entirely. What if Archie and Lilibet didn't need royal titles to have legacy? What if their identity came not from palaces and crowns, but from platforms and causes? Meghan began sketching a vision of her children as global icons, leaders in philanthropy, voices for change, symbols of modern royalty without the crown. And yet, beneath the determination, there was irony. The harder Meghan pushed to protect her children's legacy, the more she risked exposing them to the same spotlight she once claimed had destroyed her own peace. Was she saving them, or pulling them deeper into the fire? That question haunted Harry, but Meghan brushed it aside. They've already tried to erase them, she told him. Now the world will see them. The counterplan wasn't just reactive. It was bold. Meghan envisioned building an empire around her family. Documentaries, foundations, public initiatives that would rival the monarchy itself, not by mimicking its traditions, but by eclipsing them with relevance. While the palace clung to crowns and ceremonies, Meghan would claim causes and conversations. She would make Archie and Lilibet heirs to something bigger than titles, heirs to a movement. But movements require moments. And Meghan's first big move was already in motion. Rumors swirled of a high-profile interview where she would speak candidly about William's decision, the letters, and the whispers. Allies hinted at a foundation launch focused on global childhood identity and rights. And Meghan herself began dropping subtle cues in appearances, phrases like "every child deserves recognition," words that cut far deeper than they seemed. William, of course, heard the echoes. And William, ever the strategist, was not amused. While Meghan plotted in Montecito, William convened with advisors in Kensington. He had made his decision, and he wasn't about to let Meghan's counterplan rewrite it. If Meghan wanted war, William was ready for it. But before we get to William's iron resolve, let's pause on Meghan's state of mind. To the world, she appeared calm, collected, determined. But behind closed doors, she was restless, haunted, and driven by equal parts fury and fear. She knew the stakes weren't just titles. They were history, and history has always been unkind to those who lose. So Meghan sharpened her weapons, her words, her allies, her spotlight, and prepared for the battle of narratives. For her, this wasn't about reconciliation anymore. It was about victory. But here's the twist. While Meghan built her counterplan, Harry grew uneasy. He watched her strategize, plot, and prepare, and he felt the weight of the question he dared not ask. Was Meghan saving their family, or setting them up for a war they could never truly win? And as that question lingered in Harry's silence, William made his own move. A move that would prove he was not only unshaken by Meghan's counterplan, but more determined than ever to enforce his vision of the monarchy's future. Because if Meghan was preparing for battle, William was already sharpening his crown into a weapon, duty above all else. That had been drilled into William from the moment he could walk, the moment he first waved to crowds clutching his mother's hand. And now, as Meghan prepared her counterstrike from across the ocean, William sat in Kensington Palace with his advisors, his jaw set like stone, determined that nothing, not Meghan's tears, not Harry's ultimatums, not even global outrage, would sway him. To understand William's resolve, you have to understand the man beneath the crown. William has always been compared to his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth. Calm, measured, disciplined. A man who suppresses emotion in the name of duty. But behind that calm exterior lies something darker, the memory of chaos. He watched his parents' marriage collapse in front of the world. He watched his mother die in a Paris tunnel, hounded by the press. He watched his brother unravel under the weight of grief and rage. All of it etched into his soul one lesson. The monarchy only survives when its leaders are unyielding. So when the question of Archie and Lilibet arose, William's mind was clear. This wasn't personal. This wasn't about Meghan's anger or Harry's pain. This was about the crown. And William was willing to be the villain if that's what survival demanded. Inside the palace, William's advisors urged caution. Meghan's counterplan was no secret. Her phone calls to Hollywood, her hints in interviews, her carefully chosen words about every child deserving recognition. The advisors warned that she could ignite a public backlash powerful enough to damage the monarchy's image. But William dismissed their worries with a single, clipped statement. The monarchy is not built on public opinion. It is built on continuity. That was his mantra. Continuity. The crown above all else. And Meghan's counterplan, however flashy, however global, could not compete with centuries of tradition. But let's not mistake William's resolve for indifference. He knew the cost of his decision. He knew it would shatter whatever fragments of a relationship remained with his brother. He knew Meghan would never forgive him. He even knew the public might turn against him in some corners. And yet, he didn't flinch. Why? Because William had already chosen his role, the protector of the monarchy, the one who would sacrifice personal bonds for the sake of the crown, the heir who would not bend, no matter the storm. Privately, Kate played a role in this as well. At Kensington, she and William spoke late into the night, weighing the fallout. Kate, more empathetic by nature, worried about Meghan's fury, about Harry's despair, about the children caught in the middle. But William's response was always the same. If we bend for them, we bend for everyone. And if we bend for everyone, the crown will fall. It's a cold logic, one that makes sense to the heir but cuts like glass to the family left outside. Imagine William sitting at his desk, reading reports of Meghan's rumored interview plans. He doesn't panic. He doesn't rage. He simply shakes his head and mutters, "She'll do what she always does. We will do what we must." To him, the war of words was irrelevant. Meghan could flood the world with interviews, documentaries, and speeches. But in his eyes, the crown doesn't answer to Hollywood. The crown endures. But here's where William's resolve becomes more chilling. He wasn't just defending the crown from Meghan. He was defending it from Harry. In his mind, Harry had already betrayed the institution by leaving, by airing grievances, by exposing the family to scrutiny. To William, denying Archie and Lilibet titles wasn't just about the children. It was a line in the sand for Harry himself. A message: you chose exile, and this is the price. Let's pause here and ask, can you blame him? After all, William is the heir. His children, George, Charlotte, Louis, are the future of the monarchy. He has to think of their security, their roles, their legacy. To him, adding Archie and Lilibet to that line risks confusion, distraction, and division. But at the same time, doesn't this reveal the cruelty of monarchy itself? An uncle reducing his niece and nephew to strategic liabilities. A brother prioritizing crowns over kin. The contradiction is breathtaking. William, the man shaped by grief, now inflicting grief. William, the father who dotes on his own children, now dismissing his brothers. William, the heir who speaks of duty, now accused of betrayal. But he doesn't see betrayal. He sees protection. He sees sacrifice. He sees himself as the guardian of an institution bigger than blood. Still, the whispers of advisors gnawed at the edges of his resolve. Meghan's counter